Thanks again for joining us for USA Basketball's Youth and Sport Development Podcast and our series on player development. I'm Jay Demings. I am the Youth and Sport Director here at USA Basketball, and I am again joined by USA Basketball's 10-time gold medal winning coach and our Coach Development Director, Coach Don Showalter. Coach, nice to be with you again.
Hey, it's great to be on again for our fourth podcast, and been getting a lot of good comments from coaches that are listening. So I look for having another good one today.
Yeah, me too. And I, before we discuss player development in this episode, what are you hoping that our listeners took away if they were able to listen to episodes 1 through 3?
Yeah, I think just as a kind of a review for those out there listening, in episode 1, we talked about our overall USA basketball philosophy on ensuring that the game is fun and safe and developmentally appropriate for players at all levels. I think that was really a key factor there. With that, we kind of went into more detail on making the game fun, obviously, and safe. Episode 2 was probably one of my favorite episodes because we talked about the 4 C's that I think are really important with our USA basketball players, but also as part of our philosophy. And those 4 C's were communication, comfort zones, choices, and competition. And so when we talked about those 4 things, we also visited about how important those are to the development of a player, no matter what level they're at. And then our last one, we talked about some really positive actions and behaviors that coaches can actually utilize to help their teams and players grow to be their best. We talked about the communication circles, and actually I got quite a few coaches asking about that from our last episode. Catching players do something well, being very positive with that. Coaching in questions and sound bites that we think are really important instead of paragraphs. Asking questions is crucial to understanding for the players, and then actually coaching in critical moments. So we did a lot of work in those first 3 episodes, and I'm sure the coaches will get a lot out of not only those 3 but the ones today as well.
And then today's episode, obviously, we're going to try to focus on the court a little bit more on what we call our player development curriculum. So I know a lot of us out there that are coaches and are parents and people that are involved in the game and players, we think of curriculum as being classroom-based, like classroom education-based. But curriculum can apply to sports too, because there's a progression level involved, obviously. So when I know back when we established our curriculum, it was designed to help guide players and the people that are coaching them through sort of a level appropriate system of basketball development. And if you remember this, and I know we probably have to go back a couple of years now, but we took basically guiding principles developed by a couple of different coach educators, Istvan Bali and Richard Way, who they co-wrote a book called The Long-Term Athlete Development Model back in 2013. And so we took that model, which included 7 stages of development, and we shrunk it down into 4, which we're going to get into, Coach, here today a little bit. If you'd allow me, I want to kind of go back to that book, though, that those educators developed and talk a little bit about their stages, because I think it's important to show folks how that transitions to basketball, particularly in the United States, but basketball as a sport in general across the world. So educators Bali and Way talk about 7 stages of long-term athlete development. And those 7 stages, they go active start, right? That's like picking up a ball or sport for the first time, actually, whether you have a ball or not. They go into fundamentals for their 2nd stage, learning to train for their 3rd stage, training to train for their 4th stage, training to compete for the 5th stage, training to win for the 6th stage, and then they include a 7th stage called basketball for life. And what we did is we took those scientifically proven 7 stages and shrunk them down into 4. And that's how we got to our 4 levels of player development in our curriculum. And we call those 4 levels, our level 1's called introductory, then we go on to foundational, advanced, and performance. But Coach, let's today talk about those 4 levels and the importance of focusing on skill development. So, why do you think progressive development is important in a player's progression in basketball?
Yeah, that's probably the basis for players staying in the game and developing their skills, and then deciding that the game is fun, and they're going to stay with, and players are going to stay with it, because I think the progressive development, it's like any other subject area as well. If I'm talking about a math curriculum, you're not going to delve right into fractions right away until the basis of adding, subtracting have been done. If you do that, the student will be frustrated and not be able to figure things out. So math won't be any fun for them. And we really kind of take the same approach with basketball, because we want players to have some success at a level that they feel comfortable at, developing their skills, and then we add to the skill level to this. So, each level is a progressive development technique. It's based on their success with basketball and skills, as opposed to really age or grade in school or their physical attributes. Mm-hmm. And not that doesn't play a little bit of importance into it, but really the skill level has nothing to do with age. The age may help them develop a skill if they're older and are stronger and those kind of things. But really the skill itself, as you progressively develop a player, you start at the introductory level, as we call it, or you start at the active start. So the introductory level would be the lowest piece of that skill. So if I'm talking about dribbling the basketball, or I'm talking about shooting, might be a better example. If I'm doing this at an introductory level, and I want to progressively teach players how to become a better shooter, I would do this with a smaller basketball. I would start with a lower basket, lower rim, height-wise. So I may start at a 7-foot, 8-foot basket with a size 5 basketball. This instead of having a size 7 to 10-foot basket, where you really get frustrated as a young player trying to make a basket at 10 foot. This introductory level would be where you start, and then when it becomes a little bit easier with a 8-foot basket, a smaller basketball, you'd maybe raise that basket up to 9 foot. And so you could teach the proper elbow in, you teach the proper technique for shooting, and then you would progressively make that a little bit more, maybe a little more difficult, but also raise that level of skill. So the player's always kind of thinking that I can do a better job because I've had the first initial level in it. And we really emphasize then those 4 levels as they progress up to those. You add to that. So the introductory level, and I know we'll be getting to this a little bit later, but the introductory level is for young ages. So maybe, community level players, maybe ages 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, who never really played basketball before, but they're just kind of getting together, or maybe a dad is out in the driveway and they're teaching a skill to a player just starting the game. This would be the introductory level. And then as they get better at the skill, of course, you advance that skill with the foundational, which is a little more higher level, where the player actually figures out, I think I want to become a little better player. Maybe I want to advance my skill level. I figured this out, the player says, at a young level of skills, and now let's take that skills to a little higher level. And you do that with the foundational, which should be somewhere around 12, 13, 11, 12, 13, again, depending on what they've done previously. And then the advanced level would be more high school level. So you're going from straight skill development, adding some team skills with that, adding some team play, short-sided games with that, all the way up through advanced, which is high school level, and then performance, which should be like our junior national team level, and college level. So too many coaches, I think, try to teach young players how they've been taught. And if they're a college player, they would start right in teaching a player from the college level, teach that to an introductory level. And that just simply doesn't work due to the fact that that introductory person, little skill level, is just not very successful. So we think these 4 levels of our curriculum are extremely important. We put a lot of emphasis on that. I speak to these 4 levels in a lot of the clinics and academies that I go to, and try to help coaches through that. So I know that's kind of a long introduction to the 4 different levels, but again, I think it's important that we describe what they are to the coaches that are listening.
Well, it is maybe a longer introduction, but I think the levels are important because in basketball in particular, and in the United States in particular, we have a tendency to skip some steps. I think we see what we see on TV, whether it be the NBA or the Olympic levels of play, your junior team program, for example. We as I say, as coaches, try to almost push those levels upon younger players. And when I say younger players, like you had mentioned, it could be an 8-year-old, but it also could be a 14-year-old who's just not ready to do some of the things they're seeing from an NBA team 82 nights a year. And we'll get into the 4 levels a little bit more here, maybe not as much as we would like to, but maybe episodes for another time. You talked about skills. We talk about 8 essential skills for players to learn as they're sort of going, through the sport. Can you talk a little bit about those 8 skills and briefly just kind of talk about how they permeate each of the 4 different levels?
Yeah, and the nice thing about these skills, I think we've broken them down to, there's not 20 skills. There's 8 essential skills that are important to be taught for coaches. So if I'm a new coach or if I'm a dad, I'm going to sit down and I'm going to look at these 8 skills. Now I have some basis for what should I teach, as opposed to kind of going from one skill to the other, not really understanding what I should teach. So the first skill I think is obviously really important is footwork and balance. And footwork is making your body, controlling your body on the court. And this has to do with a lot of jump stops, pivoting, using your feet for an advantage. If I'm going to do a shooting drill or a screening drill, this is part of adding footwork to it. So I'm going to make a good jump stop. I'm going to have my body on balance, feet wider than the shoulders, nice knee bend. I'm going to look like a player, as I always say. And then I'm going to work on 2 reverse pivots. So you have either foot as your pivot, and reverse pivot swings your leg back. And then I'm going to work on 2 front pivots. So there's really four different pivots that need to be worked on with footwork and balance. And of course, you take this footwork and balance skill to a lot of the other skills that we teach too. I mean, you put that in with your shooting, you put it in with passing, you put it in with rebounding. So the footwork and balance really permeates a lot of the other skills that we work on. And even with our junior national team, we still really think it's important to start out with a practice session, just with our 4-line drill, where we dribble out, use a ball handling drill with it, make a jump stop, pivot, and a pass. So that's really important. Just to put these together, it's a good warm-up drill. Now, if I'm coaching a introductory level, if I'm coaching 7 or 8-year-olds, I might spend 10 minutes, 8 to 10 minutes on this particular drill, just on footwork, balance, looking like a player, as opposed to if I'm going to use this with my junior national team, I may do it for a minute or two just to review and refresh that skill. Then ball handling is another important one. Ball handling and dribbling is really important, a skill to be worked on. Using your weak hand. If a person's right-handed, what can they do with their left hand? And even as a player gets more comfortable using with ball handling and using their offhand, it's still always good to refresh that drill. I'd say one of the things that is really popular now, as far as offense goes, is a dribble drive offense. Well, if that player can't go to his left off the dribble drive, that offense isn't going to be very good. And so, this is one of the things that we emphasize in that ball handling and dribbling. And then shooting, of course, is tremendously important, and you learn how to shoot from at a young age. There are really two parts to shooting, the skill of shooting. One is from the waist up, where you do elbow in technique, follow through, eyes on the basket. And then there's the part where the waist down. And the waist down is really footwork and balance, getting to the basket, making the jump stop, going up strong, finishing up with 1 foot, both feet, those kind of things. Screening is an interesting skill, and I think it's overlooked many times with coaches. Screening is a skill that obviously is a very unselfish act on the court, because screening, you're trying to get your teammate open for a shot or a pass or whatever. So it's really an unselfish act, and the act of screening itself is very simple, because it goes back to footwork and balance. If I'm going to set a screen and I can do a good jump stop and with my feet apart and shoulders squared, hands down, that's a screen. So the action of setting a screen is not that difficult, but now I'm going to, as a coach, I'm going to work on how am I going to use that screen, accept that screen to get open. So it really is a kind of a two-man game there. And screening is really a skill that we at USA Basketball don't emphasize using at the introductory level, because the introductory level, we want players concentrating on cutting to the basket, spacing, staying away from the basketball as much as possible, and keeping good spacing on the court. If we do screening at a introductory level, sometimes everybody runs to the ball. If you've seen some 7 or 6 or 7 or 8 year olds play, when they want the ball, they all run to the ball. Well, we don't really want that happening, because we want the spacing to take place. And so screening is something that we put in more at the foundational level. Those players who really want to have a higher level of understanding of the game, it's time for screening with them. So we put this in at the foundational level. And then you talk about progressively teaching a skill, screening, something that's not taught at the introductory level. We pass and cut more. Then we teach screening away from the ball. So if I make a pass to a wing, I'm going to screen away from that pass, keeping my spacing. And the last thing we add is pick and rolls. So that's a progressive way to teach that skill of screen, as opposed to throwing in a pick and roll right away for a 7 or 8 year old, which they don't really understand. It takes a lot of practice and skill development to understand that. Passing and catching is a tremendous skill that most good teams have a very good handle with as far as skill development. The best teams that we played in our junior national team, teams from France, Spain, Argentina, all have very good passing and catching teams. And I think if we all look at what our best teams are, even at the high school level, they're the teams that pass and catch the best. Now, if I'm doing this to an introductory level, passing would be, we emphasize the technique, stepping toward our receiver, thumbs down, elbows close to the body as we pass the ball. So we emphasize technique at an early age, and that's introductory level. As we get older at it, we are going to emphasize sometimes not as much technique, because passing takes on a form of decision making, possibly more than technique. So the foundational level, maybe you're introducing how I'm going to make a pass when there's a defender right in front of me. It's not going to be a chest pass. It's not going to be a straight bounce pass. I might have to step out a little bit, make a little bounce pass. But we are making decisions on how to make the pass. So I would say that passing and catching goes from technique at an early age, introductory phase, and then foundational advanced, it becomes more of a decision-making skill. And so my practices be more from, all right, 2-on-1 situations, or passing the ball when you have being heavily guarded, or passing the ball out of a double team. So those are things that you progress with passing, but extremely important skill. Rebounding. A lot of coaches that I watch don't really teach rebounding. Maybe they'll cover it in a 2 or 3 minute talk, and then that's it. So that's a skill that needs to be not only talked about, but it needs to be drilled and repetition. And then you have the last two, whole offense and whole defense, and these are team concepts. And whole offense, both these, offense and defense, not necessarily 5-on-5 work. In fact, if I'm teaching whole offense to my introductory level, my 7-8-year-olds, I might teach pass, cut, and then somebody's got to fill that spot where the player just made a cut. So we have movement taking place, we have good spacing taking place, and so that is part of a whole offense. In fact, at the introductory level, I probably would recommend teaching no 5-on-5. And I understand that you play games 5-on-5 and stuff, but I would certainly recommend teaching more from a 3-on-0, 3-on-3 type, emphasizing your team spacing and cutting. Then as you get up in your foundational level, maybe you add 4-on-4. Of course, advanced, and you play more 5-on-5. But the whole offense, and I speak at clinics, and when I say as a younger coach, one of the things I would do more of, as I look back on my coaching, I would play more 3-on-3 for defense and offense. It makes the players understand the game. They figure out how to make cuts, how to make the passes, as opposed to playing a 5-on-5 game. It opens the court up a little bit as well. So a whole offense can be played at an introductory level, but obviously you're emphasizing only passing, cutting, and filling that spot. And so these eight skills are really we think are important. And I'll go back to the point where if I'm a player like Stephen Curry, who's arguably the best shooter in the game of basketball, he never graduates from that skill. In other words, you never get good enough that you graduate from the skill, but you never have to work on it. He still makes 300 to 500 shots after every practice. So he refreshes that skill. He reps that skill. So no matter what level you have, in fact, the more skills you learn, probably the more times you have to go back and refresh those skills. And so that's a point I always make, is you never get good enough. You're never good enough to graduate from that skill. And we think that's really important, that you keep refreshing that skill. You keep repetitioning that skill, so you always become a little bit better at it. And then when you teach these skills, you teach it in a way that you simply because players learn at a different level. I'm sure we'll get into this maybe in other episodes as well. But players learn at different ways. Some players learn by they can pick it up just by explaining a drill. Some players learn they have to see it. Some players learn better actually have to do it. So when you emphasize a skill, or when you teach a skill, you have to explain it, and then you have to show it, and then you have to rep it. Get a lot of repetitions, because the repetitions is where you make the habits. The more repetitions, the more habits, the better the habit's going to be in these skills. You can talk all you want to about shooting, but if you never get reps in, that skill of shooting won't become very good. And then after you rep it, as a coach, you make corrections to that player or that team with whatever skill that is, and then you rep it again. So you're constantly trying to improve those repetitions with every skill. So again, Jay, we talk about skills that are really, really important, and we've broken these down to 8 skills. And I think these 8 skills, if coaches would emphasize these 8 skills and get the players to have a good grasp of these skills, I think overall they would be a really good player.
Right, Coach. So we talked about our 4 levels. We're going to get into those a little deeper here. We talk about our 8 essential skills, and just as a reminder for everybody, that's footwork and balance, ball handling, shooting, screening, passing and catching, rebounding, both offensive and defensive, whole offense and whole defense, which are team concepts. But we, if I heard you correctly, recommend making modifications to the screening and the team concepts based on the level, because obviously, we don't want to go too in depth on those more advanced, skills. So, obviously those are a lot of skills. If a coach only has a small amount of time with their players, which of those 8 skills would you suggest that they focus on every practice? They've only got a few to focus on. Which would you pick?
Yeah, that's a great question, because I know a lot of coaches who coach, especially younger players, 7, 8, 9, 10, even 12, 13-year-olds. They may only have maybe 45 minutes to an hour practice session once or twice or 3 times a week, and you have to sort out, all right, what kind of skills am I going to teach if I only got maybe a short time in practice. And I think obviously the footwork and balance has to be taught, reviewed, refreshed, so to speak, with every practice. I think also shooting obviously is a skill that we probably don't do enough in a practice situation. I mean, I look at our junior national team players coming in, and we do have some really fine shooters there, but overall, that's probably a skill that I think could keep being improved, keep being taught. And then I think the skill we still need to really emphasize is passing. So footwork and balance, shooting and passing are the 3 that I would work on in a practice session if I only had a certain amount of time. And obviously you can put footwork and balance with shooting. You can put that with passing as well. So you can combine these skills, especially starting at the foundational level. So you can combine 2 or 3 skills within a team drill, so to speak. And I always say that generally you divide your practices up into thirds. The third should be spent on skill work. Third should be spent on your whole offense at any level. Maybe it's just passing and cutting, and then a third on whole defense. What is help side defense, guarding the ball, those kind of things. So if you divide your practice up into thirds, that pretty well takes in. I think you're pretty well on the track to implementing a good practice plan and a good practice session with the skills.
I've obviously watched your junior national team practices, and I can attest that you do spend time working with some of the most elite of the elite athletes on their footwork and balance, and kind of going back to the long-term athlete development model for which we based our curriculum off of. That footwork and balance portion of it sort of permeates everything that we're suggesting here, because you know, without that, and I know you gave the Steph Curry example, and this might be relevant here, but in the long-term athlete development model, their active start phase doesn't even involve necessarily a ball. They suggest that children, young children, 3 years old, 4 years old, 5 years old, should take part in activities in four types of activities on land. So that could be basketball, but it could be running.
Yeah.
It could be it could be soccer. On ice, so that's skating or skiing, or ice or snow. In the water, so things like swimming or different sports that you might be able to play, surfing, things like that. Um, and then in the air, things like gymnastics. And so anyway, their model, and we based it off of this, is that if you can get young people to take part in a variety of activities, we call it multi-sport today, but I'm just talking general activities, by and large, you're going to see those players in basketball be a little more advanced, even at some of the earlier levels, right? Because they have those fundamental balance elements already implemented. And so I know there are some
Yep.
coaches out there, coach listening now, and they're like, oh, this is ridiculous. I'm dealing with high school kids, and I'm going to work on footwork and balance, but it's so important. I know you would recommend that they try to implement footwork and balance type skill and drill work within their feeder programs, even, right?
Absolutely. And I'll even give a better example with footwork and balances. Two examples. Kobe Bryant, arguably one of the best NBA players ever to play the game. He got his start by playing. He grew up in Italy, so he played soccer. So he had great footwork and balance because of that, and then he carried that over to basketball. I also go to the point of Jay Wright, who coaches Villanova. Has won 2 out of the last 3 championships as well. But I go to his practice, and his practice is really constructed all around footwork and balance, getting to the paint, jump stopping, making a pass out of there, making a shot out of there. So, and we're talking, national championship caliber players that are really embedded in getting their footwork and balance to the point where they're very hard to guard. And so same with our junior national team. A great example for us is Jayson Tatum, who was an all-star this past year playing for the Boston Celtics. But his footwork is so advanced and so good, from his shooting to his passing. He really has a great grasp on looking like a player, getting his hips down, making his jump stops, and using his pivots. So coaches, I think, miss that point a lot, in fact that this is not just an introductory skill. This is, like I said, you never graduate from a skill, so you keep refreshing that skill. So I think those are some points that I would hope coaches would kind of remember as they're coaching at any level.
You kind of brought up a good point in the Kobe Bryant topic, the late Kobe Bryant, unfortunately. But
Yeah.
having learned overseas as a young player, I think what he probably saw there that we don't see here in the States as much is sort of that balance between playing games and practicing. And that ratio in the United States, whether it be due to the club environment or the travel team environment, or what's typically referred to as the quote unquote AAU environment. Um, can you talk about the importance of maintaining balance there? I know in the club environment, for example, now players will play 4 to 6 games on a weekend and practice once during the week, and a variety of reasons for that, obviously, maybe, but why is it important to have that balance?
Yeah, that's a great point, because um, as I watch international players and speak to club coaches at the international level, I find out that their game to practice ratio is about 1-6, one game to every 6 practices. And in our country, the United States, it's just switched around. It's about 6 games to every 1 practice. And so I think many times we are really losing some of that skill development work. And I understand that, players might have their own trainer or whatever. But I still think it's important for a coach to understand how your team is going to get better depends on the level of those skills of your players and if they get better. One of the things as a young coach I always I look back on, and one thing I think I improved more as a young coach is I kept spending time with skill development in my practices. I know I go to a lot of high school practices now to evaluate players for our junior national team, and a lot of times, they're so involved with we have to do the team offense, the team defense, that they overlook having any time of skill development in their practices. And I think that teams that have continuous skill development in their practices tend to get better as the season goes on. And I would say this with club teams too. If you have 2 or 3 practices with skill development from day 1 of practice all the way through however many practices you have as a coach, maybe 50 or 60 or 70, and you continue with that skill development, your teams tend to be better at the end than they were at the beginning or midway. And one of our points of emphasis, one of our standards is no more than 2 games per day. We recommend from the USA basketball standpoint, but there's really got to be a balance there. And I go back to watching a 3rd grade practice and for an hour practice and for about 40 minutes the coaches played 5-on-5 and let them scrimmage. Well, that's going to be a very difficult team to improve their skill level if all they do is just run up and down and scrimmage. So really has to be a balance there between what we're doing with the game situation and what we're doing with skill development. And I've said for many years that our kids have probably played too many games and during a time when they're at a young age, 7 all the way up through high school. We probably play too many games and not enough time is spent on skill development, and that goes back to the coach's emphasis as well. If we're just spending time with 5-on-5 stuff, we're probably not going to have the emphasis of you got to become a better rebounding team or a better passing team. So that balance is important with those 2 things.
Mm-hmm. So, and this falls back to the coach. It probably also falls back to the parent too, in the sense that, if we can get the coach to flip the ratio from more practices than games, right? And then we can get the coach to flip within those practices to focus less on strategizing for the upcoming game and more on using your practice time to develop the players. Then we need the parent to recognize those, in this case, we're talking about club and travel teams. Find a club and travel team that has your child's best interest in mind and not necessarily their win-loss record. So I think that's a good takeaway. And what I wanted to do, Coach, though, I know we don't want to take up too much of everybody's time, but we do want to talk briefly about the 4 levels. Just have you give a brief overview of each level. I know you started at the introductory level, maybe revisit that one. Suggested ages. I know we talked about this is not an age-focused curriculum, but maybe it's a good time to give a guide for the coaches that are listening and the parents that are listening about what we mean at introductory, foundational, advanced, and performance levels.
Yeah, just kind of a synopsis of those 4 levels. Again, the introductory level, it starts out at ages 3, 4, whenever a player starts to pick up a basketball, and then they figure out that the game is fun for one thing. If the game is fun, they're going to spend some time on their own developing their skills. And so the main thing that introductory level, as a coach, if I'm coaching a group of 7 or 8 year olds, the main thing I want to do is instill the love of the game. And I know I've said this before on other episodes, but instill that love of the game, because that's how they get started with really developing their skills. And they're going to develop their skills outside of a coach's practice session. This introductory level, the emphasis should not be on 5-on-5 play. It should not be on winning a game. That's not what we're doing at the introductory level. And I know that leagues are going for that level as well. But I think we need, as coaches, we need to really step back and let them play at this level, but also emphasize that winning is certainly not what we want to emphasize. That's not a goal at the introductory level. That might be an objective, that might be an outcome, but our goal is to progressively teach it the skill. And then the foundational level, this is kind of more fundamental, basic basketball skills. In other words, at this level, kind of between the ages of 8 and 13, a player figures out, I really want to become a better player. Now we kind of graduate from the community-based to picking out a club team that's really important to be on, or it's still a big social area part of this, but also the player figures out that I want to be part of a club team or part of a bigger team than just a community-based team. And so, like you said, Jay, I think it's important for parents to understand. All right, it's important for me to be on a club team. First of all, it still emphasizes the fundamentals and skills, and not place so much emphasis on the game and winning the game. You teach a lot of concepts in this, and you start to teach, passing and cutting and maybe some screening and just how to play the game. And you really do this by doing short-sided games, 2-on-2, 3-on-3 skill games, and then maybe throwing in some 5-on-5. But really, the actual focus is not on the actual 5-on-5 competition. So players will remember skills better if they learn it on their own. And so my phrase always is, all right, players need to figure it out. And when you play 3-on-3, that's how they figure out how to play. And as a coach, it's not so much what you teach, but how you teach it. And we try to control every movement of the young players on the court. But sometimes I think many times these players are better if they figure it out. A backdoor cut. If they do that without being told, then they can really pick that up. So foundational level is now a great start to a player's initial introductory level, where they are really establishing fundamental skills. They're more experienced with that aspect of it. Then you have the advanced level. Now they move on from 12 and 13 more into the 13 to 18 range. High school range would be your advanced level. I'll back up and say at the foundational level, zone defense certainly is not a part of the whole defense at that level. It should only be taught man to man. And I think in the United States, sometimes players 8, 9, 10-year-olds are playing a half-court 1-3-1 trap or those kind of things, which really is not a development type of game or allows those players to develop the fundamentals. That's more, I think, more for the coach to say we won the game as opposed to what did the players learn. But now you get to the advanced level, and you're starting to build strength in the player. They're really involved with becoming a better player. There's still basketball skills development. They really have. You're trying to get more skills developed within a drill. So you're combining a lot of the skills that we talked about earlier with that. So the advanced level now might be footwork with shooting, footwork with passing, and screening. Now you're putting screening into the mix here as well. Now you're upping your level of 5-on-5 play. Maybe 30-40% of the time is 5-on-5 play, along with 3-on-3 or 2-on-2 in practices. And then as you progress in this advanced level, you're probably going to make more of a 50-50 training to competition ratio. And I think it's really important in this level as well that the competitive nature of the drills increases. So you're going from introductory level to foundational level. There's some competition based in those two levels, but now your advanced level is a much higher level of competition. So those skills, now you put them in a competitive arena, then now those skills take on a new life of their own, because you are really emphasizing the competition factor with the skills, and they're making skills probably a little more difficult to attain when you start putting competition on it. So that's the advanced level. Most of us that coach high school, I would say, would have the advanced level, or hope to, because this would be a high level for high school teams, travel teams, club teams as well. We're not forgetting the skill development. We're not forgetting that we don't graduate from skill. We still have to work on those. We don't just play games. We certainly have a lot of practice within this level as well. And then the last one, Jay, is our performance level. Probably our junior national team players are at this level. College players, obviously NBA players, is at the highest level. And now we're getting stronger. We're maximizing our fitness and competition preparation, as well as our individual and position-specific skills. We're getting into more position-specific. In the other levels, we should teach all players all skills. And now we're getting into, all right, what skills are more specific to a post play or a point guard play? You're spending a little more time with specific position work on these. And now we're training for competition. We're putting in obviously scouting reports, and we're doing more toward what it takes to win in both these last two levels. I mean, now we can play some zone defense if that suits our team. We're trying to figure out as a high school coach what is best for our players. How can we give them the best opportunity to win the game? Because winning now is probably, it should be much more important than it is at the younger levels. So we advance now to that performance level, and I find out that our junior national team players, I'll give an example, they are so physically gifted. Jalen Green is going in the G League next year, is tremendously physically gifted. But at some point, he's going to have to recall the skills to be a complete player. I mean, he's not going to be able to physically dominate Jayson Tatum the same way. Jason's done a great job of developing his skills along with his physical ability. Now you have really a great player with that. So those are the four levels that, and a little bit of description of how those four levels kind of intertwine and work with each other as well.
And that's great. And there's a likelihood, obviously, that the 8 skills that we talked about for a player, they're going to fall at various levels, right? Like maybe just talk a little bit about that. You deal with some high level players on the junior team side. You've dealt with some, average to above average players when you were coaching high school basketball as well. I would imagine that those 8 skills aren't all within one level per player, correct?
Correct, very much so. And I think this is a challenge for a coach. If you have, let's say you have your introductory level, Jay, with some 8-9-year-olds, and out of 10 players, 8 of them can do a skill, such as dribbling, maybe just stationary dribbling, right hand, left hand, right hand, left hand. Now you would progress to a little more difficult skill with dribbling, even though maybe two of them you'd have to catch up. So, so I think that the level that you as a coach look at your players and look at your team and evaluate their skill level. Now you teach to the skill level that is going to make those players advance their skills from a competition standpoint. And like I said, like you mentioned, not all the players that we get from our junior national team have the same level of skills with ball handling or rebounding. So I think you try to teach those skills based on what most of the players, 80% of players on your team can do. And then I find out that some of those players who aren't quite as skilled, they'll catch up to the players that are more skilled by getting out of their comfort zone a little bit and doing the competitive type of drill. So yeah, but that's a great point to make as well, because not all your players are going to be at the same level, and you want to try to teach so those players all progress with the skill.
Which I think the most interesting part there for the listeners, and especially those of you that are coaching out there, or even the parents that are out there and players too, that you have this on your junior national team program too. So it's not, and granted, we have been blessed with some great talent at those levels, but to try to devise a practice, you still have to differentiate things for the players that you're working with. But coach, finally, for this segment anyway, why do you feel that we as coaches have a duty to help players progress themselves as much as we do have a duty to progress our teams in terms of wins and losses?
Well, I think they kind of both go hand in hand a little bit, Jay. I think one of the things that our philosophy is player development, and so we need to see progress in skills. We need to see progress in skills such as developing a left hand, because if we see that skill develop individually, then we're going to see our team get better. If our team gets better, then we can point it back to the skills getting better or improving. And that's why when I talk about practice sessions developing skills, I think the coaches who continue to really emphasize skill development throughout all their practices, and each practice, their team gets better as their season goes on because of that skill development. And I look back in my own career coaching high school basketball, and I look back on the years where we really had good teams. More so, it was because we had skill development that was worked on to all 70 or 80 practices. And so I think one of those really helps the other one. If I'm going to have a good team, I'm not going to have a good team unless I have good skilled players. So as a coach, I have to really keep that in mind as I'm putting my practice plans together, and I'm putting my team together.
And then that responsibility obviously sort of permeates the whole philosophy behind our basketball for life model, in what this whole series has been about, which is to keep players in the game for life and interested as, hopefully they go on as players, but more likely than not, most of us are going to end up in the coach, fan, parent, administrator bucket, like ourselves. But what I hope people take away from this is that it is important to win, and you've got to train to win, but you also have to learn how to compete in order to win. But you have to know how to train in order to compete. We have to teach kids to train, and coaches to teach kids to train. And the whole thing, to me, really is built on fundamentals. And again, if I can keep going back to that active start stage, because I know we have people out here who aren't necessarily coaching 4, 5, and 6 year olds, but we'll have children at some point here, if they don't already, that we're going to look to get involved. And that active start stage, or that introductory stage, keep those players involved in other sports. Again, we talked about on land, on ice, in the air, and on water, but keep them involved in things, because that will help them get to those later stages. So, well, Coach, this has been a lot of fun. This series has been a lot of fun. I know we're going to do a lot more. This is season one, and the end of season one, if you will. But I know we have plans for season two in the coming weeks, and we're going to dive into a variety of basketball topics. Correct?
Absolutely. This is to me, Jay. I think this is the whole essence of what coaching is about. Understanding how to progressively coach, understanding the level of players, understanding skill development, and then team development as well. So this has really been good. I know just the comments I get from coaches, I think it's been very helpful to many coaches, young coaches who are just starting out coaching, and a good reminder for coaches who have been coaching for many years as well.
Well, thank you, Coach. And I want to thank everybody out there who has listened. We encourage you, if this is the first podcast you've heard, to go back and listen to our first 3 episodes earlier on. Look for future episodes, but thank you for joining us at the USA Basketball Youth and Sport Podcast. This has been our player development series. This ends season 1, but look for season 2 coming in the coming weeks, where we'll dive into a variety of different basketball topics, and really based on your suggestions. So if you don't mind, email us with your suggestions. The email address is youth, that's YOUTH, at usabasketball.com, youth at usabasketball.com. So email us with any ideas, suggestions, and questions you have. Good luck to everybody out there on their playing and coaching journeys, and we'll see you all soon.